Welcome to Decoding the Body. I'm going to share probably the next 10, 15 minutes on some of the excerpts and key points from a talk that I've given in office before. And this is one of my favorite topics to talk about, partially because of how learning this philosophy and learning this approach to understanding health and well-being and healing has changed my own life and how I've seen it over the years transform other people and how they look at what it's going to take to heal and their role in their own healing. So, kind of as a disclaimer, I really believe that you are your own best doctor. And that is an important piece of this, is to recognize how important you and this inner wisdom and this inner knowing and this inner ability we all have to heal really is. And that's why I say you are your own best doctor. You're the person who is occupying your body and experiencing your life. And your life and what your body is going through are directly connected. And that can be a big deal to just even recognize that. Unfortunately, we're not taught a lot of these things. We're not taught many times to look at what's happening in our internal world and external world as connected, right? So we may be adults before we really recognize, like, when I'm really stressed at work or in my family, all of a sudden I'm not sleeping well and this other symptom shows up in my body. Or potentially, like, when we looked back on something and we see the connection between this symptom or this complaint that was happening with my health showed up around this time this other thing happened, right? So again, that's where learning to recognize that your own awareness to your own system and your own life experience and your body and the symptoms that your body may be telling you or showing you have a direct connection, right? So that's the premise behind this conversation we're having, is to learn to listen to the body and essentially learn to start to decode the body. And I do this with myself. I do it with my family and my kids, and certainly with patients or practice members, is wanting to share with them a lot that we've learned about how to listen to our bodies and how to see these connections and sit with some of the messages sometimes that we're starting to understand about what our body is telling us, right? So a huge paradigm shift for most of us is to recognize that the Western medicine model, though there's certainly a time and a place for some of their interventions and some of the things that they can do are truly miraculous, there also is kind of this notion that we don't want symptoms. So symptoms show up, we want to suppress them. We might take medication, we might go through a surgery and cut something out, but we don't generally get taught or sometimes even asked, well, what do we think that, this symptom is related to? Or when did this show up? Or looking at the whole person and the whole life and kind of the storyline, if you will, as to what the body's been doing. So another piece of this that is a key point is that I don't believe what shows up in the body is ever random. It is directly related to our adaptability, our resilience, what's happened in the external world that we've had to adapt to, what's happened in our internal world, like self-talk and toxicity, and what our system is trying to adapt to, which is again why when we get to the understanding that we want to get to root causes, we want to understand that our bodies are continually and our systems are continually striving to stay as adaptable and resilient and wanting to heal as possible. Now, given the external environment and the internal environment, it may not be able to adapt in the way that we'd like to see because of the resources it has and the state that the person may live under. And so that's again where starting to look at the full story can help us realize that sometimes what my body is doing is a byproduct of what else is happening around me, and I need to change some of these things so that I can get a different result versus just suppressing a symptom or covering it up, right? So I also believe that we need to show love to our systems and our bodies, and when we're really angry at our system or angry at a symptom that continually is there, that's not wrong. However, trying to shift from frustration to trying to pay attention is a really critical shift to make, where we're willing to look at where we can make change and we can contribute to our healing by looking at it from a different angle. Okay, so some resources I generally recommend is one, a book that I hand out in the office a lot. We hand it out in the office a lot. It's Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life. That book I've referenced many times because the back has a really amazing kind of dictionary or thesaurus that lays out, different parts of the body and corresponding mental and emotional connections to why that symptom might show up. So that is one of the decodings, is to recognize that we aren't just physical bodies and we're not just having a physical only experience. We are having mental, emotional, spiritual, chemical experiences as well. And so a lot of times what our body is showing us, even though it is showing up in the physical body, is related to these other elements, right? And so stories I like to share, usually, just to kind of show this is, this is a story that happened in practice years ago where a woman who had been in regularly, I'd see her most months, was doing quite well, had a history of having some back pain. For the most part, that had been under control. She had been doing quite well with it for a long time. And she came in, and I hadn't seen her too long before that. And she came in and she had put her back out. And it was pretty significant to the point that she was walking antalgic, meaning like she was walking kind of tipped to one side. And I said, tell me what you did. And she's like, I don't even know. She's like, I didn't do anything. And, sometimes we'll hear that, right? Like, well, I picked up a Kleenex, right? Or I just bent and, something went out. And that's always interesting where it's like, well, why now? Why today? Why did all of a sudden the back go out? And, she obviously was in a lot of pain. And I said, okay. And I had rapport with her. So, again, the person has to be open and willing to have some of these discussions sometimes for us to just dig a little deeper. But I said, what else? Like if it wasn't something that you think you did physically, is there anything else going on that's really like overwhelming you or stressing you? And she said, well, actually, my son just moved back in. And it wasn't just him that moved back in. He brought his girlfriend and she moved in with him. And so now there's two more people that I need to like feed and have groceries for. And she was feeling really overwhelmed. And when you look up the metaphysical or the mental emotional connection in the lower back of the spine, and the mental emotional cause of that area probably over being overwhelmed, it's feeling like you either lack support or that you're having to support everyone. And that's straight from the Louise Hay book. So what's interesting is the more you kind of study this, the more you start to see there is, generally, it's not that it's not happening in the physical body. It certainly is happening in the physical body. It's just not only, if we only focus on the physical, we miss a lot of what else is going on. So in her case, I just shared with her, it's like, okay, it makes sense. Like your body is overwhelmed and your body is intelligent. So it puts some of that stored energy or that overwhelm in the area that literally makes sense. Like your lower back is your support. And so the body is quite literal in where things show up, right? Like heart issues generally is something with sending and receiving love and how that energy moves through our system. Because again, we're energetic beings. Gut issues. What am I not digesting? Tight upper back. Am I carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders? Or do I feel like I have a lot of stress? Sometimes it's even good stress, like a lot happening, but there's just a lot on me, right? Neck and ability to move our necks. Our necks are like head on a swivel, right? It's also our flexibility to see different perspectives and have an open mind, right? So again, most of us haven't been taught to look that there is this connection between the energetics in our life, in our emotional life, and our mental patterns, our belief systems, and also how our body stores some of this energy and some of, as we say in chiropractic, this life force. So when we look for that, especially if there's a pattern, maybe it's a pattern of headaches, maybe we're very self-critical, maybe there's a pattern of not listening to our bodies, pushing our body past the point of, what it can withstand, and then not giving it the rest it needs. And all of this is to say that, again, if we're our own best doctor, we have to learn to listen, right? And this is not about blaming ourselves, because actually it's about empowering ourselves. If we empower ourselves, we start to realize, like, I can make change. I can see some of these patterns for myself. I can become somebody who actually learns to decode my own system and really listen so that my body doesn't have to scream. In Louise Hay, we talk about too that sometimes when we have unconsciously suppressed something, that's an area that is going to show up because awareness or attention is what it is trying to create, right? So a symptom is definitely our body trying to create awareness. I'll share a personal story. I have two young kids. There was a lot going on in our practices. We have multiple practices, and I do a fair amount of speaking and teaching in the profession. And so about a year and a half ago, I had felt like there was kind of this tension pattern that I think had been present in my hip for some time. Because even when I was pregnant, my boys are now, my youngest is 5. When I was pregnant, it would never hurt. It just felt like if I was in a certain position, I could feel a little numbness in there. Well, fast forward to we've got more going on. We've got more doctors coming in, change happening, all sorts of things. And I woke up and I did a little yoga and I just pivoted and something just went kind of like clunk in my hip. And I remember thinking like, that didn't feel good. That felt weird. And as the weekend progressed, it just tightened right up, right? And it was so painful that I couldn't lift my leg to get into the car, which is really not like me. I'd never had anything like this before. And clearly, I'm doing what I can do to get adjusted often. I get adjusted usually every week. I go to yoga most weeks. I'm, drinking water. I'm cognizant of a lot of things physically, but something that I wasn't paying attention to was how much that I was resisting this change in our expansion and kind of the emotional load that I was taking on in trying to like steward the practices forward and everything else happening in my personal life and practice life. And what ended up happening is I made a shift in my mind where it was almost like my body was telling me something's got to give, right? And I knew what that something was. I had to make a change in how I was working and give myself more grace, a little more flexibility, not carry the load. And luckily, I have people around me who, when I asked for help and I went and laid and did some myofascial work or massage work, the woman that I saw is also very in tune to this type of teaching. And she said, I can feel it in your TFL, which is a muscle in your leg and your hip. She's like, however, I don't think it's just physical. I think it's, what you're carrying and you need to let other people help you. And sure enough, after I made some of the switch just in my mind, which I did happen very quickly because I realized I have to listen. Like this isn't my first rodeo recognizing like if we don't listen, then it screams more. And sure enough, my hip got like way better and has continued to heal from that point. So I share that just because it isn't always comfortable looking for more of the root because it does require us to try on new beliefs, try on new ideas, listen and continue to listen. It's not a job that like you listen once and it's all done. And some of the listening may be like that inner knowing or that inner awareness that, hey, I need to change how I'm treating my body. Like maybe I need to be drinking more water. Maybe I need to move more often. Maybe I need to not hang out in this arena because I get stressed out by it and I take that home and I don't sleep well. So that's where when we recognize the wholeness of ourselves and that our nervous system is constantly trying to go through adaptation with whatever we're experiencing, and that we really shouldn't be in flight or fight mode all the time. So we have to want that for ourselves where we want to be able to slow down, want to be able to rest and digest, want to be able to pursue a purpose in our lives. We are here to create, I believe, and stay engaged. And that can be very healthy too for us to have something we're pursuing and working hard at. So good stress, but still being very aware that, we're not a machine and we shouldn't treat our bodies like they're just machines, right? So this should be empowering as we start to really think about how can I change how I treat my body, how I listen to my body, how I nurture my body, and also who's on my healthcare team. Because this is true no matter if we're, 5 years old or 55 years old or 95 years old, our bodies are working for us, continually trying to adapt and keep us healthy. And a great example of that is, if you cut your finger, you cut your hand, like depending on the health of our body determines how fast and rapid that repair happens, but it happens to all of us if we're alive. It heals. It may have a gnarly scar, but it heals, right? Same thing with a fever. We've been taught that like a fever is generally bad and we want to suppress the fever, but most of the time, like 99.9% of the time, the fever is not something to be feared. It's something actually that is really working for us, trying to burn something out of our system, move through that thing, process through it so that we can come back to homeostasis, right? So I really wanted to just tease some of this out. For us, this is rooted in how our philosophy is that the body is self-healing, self-regulating, self-adapting. And we want to listen to it and we want to support it through care that supports our resiliency, our adaptability, keeps us in top shape so that we have our best chance at being nimble with what life throws at us, and that we can more gracefully move through the symptoms that our body is going to communicate to us because we actually listen. So you can think about maybe what your body's been telling you recently, where you could lean into listening a little bit more. And obviously, when you're in the office, we're always happy to have that conversation. Thanks for listening.